How's it going, and welcome to the Guitar Effect. My name's Rob. In this video I'm going to be taking a look at this. This is the Opus from Two Notes. And what this is a very small compact box that is a digital modeling solution that models basically everything you would need to either augment or replace your amplifier, okay? And that's in a various number of situations. This is Two Notes' current sort of flagship processor. They have a huge range of products that are for augmenting your amplifier, and they also have a Revolt preamp. The Revolt preamp is an all-tube preamp, and the reason I have this box is I bought it because I have the Revolt, and I wanted to explore sort of cabinet simulation more in depth from the Revolt, because normally I just use the analog out. I'll put a video about the Revolt up here, okay? And that will explain what the Revolt is. It's a 3-channel all-tube preamp that I use to replace the amplifier I had at home for making demos here. And what this does in that situation is augments it by having IORs or indeed Two Notes kind of cabinet and mic and room and reverb and stuff simulations, right? So what I'm going to do is just, first of all, we're going to have a listen to it in the track. What I'm going to do is go through the I/O on it, right? And then I think how it works is better explained in the audio demos video, because an interesting thing about this unit is there's no foot switch on it. It's not really a pedal per se, although you could. It is very, very compact and extremely powerful in the things it can do. You can put this on your pedal board and it can replace either your amplifier or your cabinet, right? But can also do reverb as well, which in terms of signal chain ordering and stuff is very useful. So I'll just go through the I/O on it now. Okay, so on the right hand side there are 2 jacks, right? And one is the input jack. So you would either input your guitar or the signal from your head, or in my case the signal from my preamp, right? So you could take the effects end from your amp and plug it in here, or you could actually take the powered speaker jack from your head and plug it in here, right? And then there is a 2-speaker output. So what you would do in this instance is you would put it in between your head and cab, or if you have a combo in between the head and the speaker, and you would use it to send a direct sound either for recording or to your PA. What this is not is an attenuator, right? So you cannot use it to lower the volume on your amp, and you cannot, it's not a load box either, so you cannot plug your head into it without plugging the cab in, or you will damage your head, right? So it's really important to state that this is not a load box. This does not replace your actual cabinet when you're using an amp, right? If you plug a preamp into it, it's fine. but you cannot turn on your head if it's not plugged into a cabinet unless you take the cabinet out of the speaker out here. There's also a switch, right? And the switch says amp, line, or instrument. So amp obviously is when you're plugging the powered speaker out into the input. Line, for example, is I'm taking the line level output from my Revolt and I'm plugging into it, and instrument is when I'm plugging my guitar directly into it, right? And then there's also a USB-C port for plugging it into its software or using it to update it or load IORs into it or whatever that might be. And then there's a 12 volt DC, is that 200? 200 milliamp. 200 milliamp is super low for this, wow. That's really interesting. I think, the reason for that is because it has a very, very small one color display. So it doesn't need a lot of power to run a big fancy display. Right, okay, and then when we go around the other side then, there's a line out. So if I'm using this purely as a home recording tool, I can plug into the guitar in and plug out the line out into my interface, and that will work in that way. There's also a DI out, which is an instrument or a microphone level output with a ground lift, okay? And then there is it's an XLR, by the way. So you can basically come out via jack or XLR. And then there is so for actually just to get into that a bit further, if I was using this with my head, I would plug my head into the input, my speaker into the output, and then take the DI out and run it to either a mixer or a PA or whatever direct sound I wanted to record. But again, it's not going to lower the level of my amp, and I have to plug my cabinet in if I'm doing that. Then there's a line out, a DI out. They kind of serve the same purpose. One's a jack, one's an XLR. The XLR has a ground lift in case you get ground loop problems. Then there's also a headphone out, so you can just plug your guitar in and use this as a practice tool. It's an expensive practice tool, but you could use it as a practice tool. And then there's an aux in where you can plug your phone in or whatever, play along with tracks. And there's also a MIDI in. Now, I'm a MIDI guy, I use MIDI a lot. The other reason that I bought this specifically to pair with the Revolt is MIDI, right? So what this means is, say you have an amp that has 3 channels and those 3 channels are switchable by MIDI. Like for example, the Marshall, the last one they brought out, the JVM has 4 channels and a load of MIDI switching capability within those channels. Say we're using an amp like that and you had a MIDI foot switch on the floor. You could, and that has 4 channels, say it has clean, crunch, dirty and lead, for example, right? I can't remember what they're called. You could put this in between the head and the cab, take MIDI out of the amp or indeed out of the foot switch if you're using sort of MIDI controller, and you could control a different IOR per channel. Now, what I'm doing is when I'm using the Two Notes Revolt, it has MIDI out, and both of these, by the way, are the tiny little MIDI jack. You can see it there. It's like the headphone size jack. You literally take a headphone cable, plug it out of the MIDI out of the Revolt into the MIDI in of the Opus, and now I have a clean channel where I have a Fender IOR, style IOR. I have a Marshall drive channel where I have a Pete Thorne 212, and then I have a Soldano where I have a Pete Thorne 212 but with different microphone combinations, and I'll explain all that in the audio demo. And having MIDI on this means that every time I switch channel I can load a different IOR, which is really, really useful. Okay, so that kind of explains the ins and outs of it. It's a very simple unit. There's a menu here, by the way, with some encoder knobs which allow you to navigate everything that you can navigate on the app. I don't demonstrate the menu at all. I do everything on the desktop app. You can use a desktop app via a USB cable, or you can use the exact same app on a phone via Bluetooth, which is really, really good. Again, I don't get into the Bluetooth because I just plugged it straight into the computer. It's just easier to edit that way on a bigger screen, basically. So, but you can do everything you can do on the screen with these 2 encoders. It's a little bit cumbersome, but you can do it. And then you can also use phone app. I think most people would use a phone app. And also being able to use a phone app means if you get to a gig and you want to change something, you've massive amounts of control over it by just using your phone, which is really good. So that's the unit. I guess we should take a listen to it now. So here's the audio demo. Okay, so there's going to be 2 parts to this demo. The first is I'm going to demo using the Opus by itself as a all-in-one direct solution, and then secondly I'm going to use it as basically a power amp and cab sim with the Two Notes Revolt, which is the main amplifier I use, well, preamp I guess, direct for recording my demos here at home, and to see how much does the Opus add to the onboard analog cab sim from the Revolt. Okay, so starting off with the Opus by itself, what I'm going to do is, as you can see, I have the Opus in set there. Never get that right. And what I'm going to do is when I'm using the interface, I'm going to cut to the interface back and forth so you can see what I'm doing, okay? So first of all, the guitar I'm using is this. This is my Bernie, like 50 style Les Paul with P90s. The Opus is pretty impressive by itself, I have to say, with certain kind of sounds. So I'm using the Bernie straight into, actually I'm putting the T-Rex Diva drive in front to show how the Opus takes pedals, and then I'm coming straight out of the Opus straight into the interface. Simple as guitar, pedal, input of the Opus, out of the Opus into the interface. So I have 3 presets. I have a clean preset, right? I have a like dirty preset, and I have a heavy preset. Okay, so to talk about each of them, the first one, and I'll stick the interface up on screen now just to show you how the whole thing works. Okay, so just to show you what you did, the different things you have here, right? You have the name of the preset up top here, then you've got the type of reverb, then you've got the cabinet in use, and then across the bottom here you've got noise gate, a preamp, a power amp, you've got 2 mics, and this is using the virtual cabinet as opposed to an IR loader, which is here. So you have, as I said, you've the name of the preset, you've got the reverb, you've got the cab, the gate, the preamp, the power amp, the 2 different mics, you've got an output level for the preset, and then you've got an output level for the unit in general. Then over here you've got the ability to browse all the different cabinets, and these are like not IRs, these are like 2 Notes cabinets. Then you have the post effects, you've got an EQ, an enhancer, and a reverb. Okay, so what I'm doing here is I'm using the Foundry preamp, which is like the Fender Deluxe Reverb style preamp, into a 6L6 power amp, which is actually wrong. It should be 6V6. Is there actually a 6V6? No, there's not. So it's into a 6L6 power amp, and then I'm on the pentode mode with the volume up at 76% and the depth at 50%, right? Then over here, there's 2 cabinets on the 2 mics on the cabinet. There's a condenser mic and there's a dynamic, so a 57 and a BTL 414, whatever that is now. And then I'll talk about these in a minute. And then over here, I have the cabinet on, obviously, and then I have I'm using the Nashville Maestro 112 original, which you can see here is kind of a tweed cabinet. And then the EQ, the enhancer are off, and the reverb is set to a spring, and it's on. So here's what that sounds like. Bridge pickup on my P90 loaded Les Paul. Pretty nice, right? Middle pickup. And neck pickup. So, as you can hear, if I dig in, right, if I play lightly, it's a really nice Fender Deluxe reverb, and I think that's a Fender Deluxe reverb is a very specific type of clean sound. But if I dig in, there's a little bit of drive there. Okay, so that's the clean sound. And how does that clean sound take pedals? Well, I have the Diva drive from T-Rex over on the floor here. So back up to the neck pickup first. I'm playing the Eric Clapton thing. And then hit the pedal. Pretty nice, like that's a kind of a bluesy overdrive. If I go back to the back pickup. Off. On. Really, really nice. It takes pickups very, very well. Or takes pickups, it takes pedals very well. So that's kind of the clean sound. Now, I'm going to jump over to the screen for a second because what I want to talk about here is the use case of this. What I'm talking about using, how I'm talking about using this here is specifically as a rehearsal, gigging, live tool for going straight to the PA, right? In this sense, it sounds pretty amp-like to me. And also, I'm going to flip back to the screen now in a sec, but before I do, I want to talk about the philosophy of what I'm talking about in making this video. There are certain elements that are available in the Opus that I just wouldn't use in this context because I want to keep the setup as simple as humanly possible, right? So I'm going to jump over to the interface to show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so I have my preamp, I have my preamp down here and there's EQ on it. When I was setting this up, I set up the EQ to be the way I wanted, and specifically, it's quite trebly so that I can use a tone knob on my guitar to make it duller or less high-endy if I want, right? Then the power amp's important because it gives a certain amount of dynamic punch and stuff, and there's a depth control that basically controls the bassiness, and then there's a volume. I selected the power amp I wanted, that's all fine. But then I go over here and I selected the cabinet I wanted. I like the sound of the cabinet, but I didn't use the EQ or the enhancer. Now I'm going to just show you the power of the EQ for a second. It's going to zero it, or at least nearly zero it, right? So here is the guitar as it sounds. With the EQ, I can dramatically control. I added bass there. EQ off, EQ on, EQ off. Actually kind of a low mid kind of thing. And there's all these different, I can bump the mids if I want. Now, I'm not going to use that. And the reason I'm not going to use it is I want to keep it to be as simple as possible. So as I would do with an amplifier, my EQ is coming from the preamp, right? I'm not using the enhancer, I'm not using the EQ. And the other thing is with the enhancer, right? Let me show you what I mean. Turn on the enhancer. It sort of becomes super real. It's a very hard thing to explain. It sounds like a digital guitar sound to me now. Like all the highs and everything are way too enhanced. I don't want that. I may want it in a situation if I was recording, but I will put it on after the fact when I can hear it in the track. In terms of a live rig, I don't want that. And I definitely want this spring reverb because it's really nice spring reverb. The other thing is, and at this point it's worth mentioning that I've spent a lot of time with this unit. Like we're talking 10 days arriving at sounds where I would get a sound, come back to it the next day, not really like it, and I kept doing that. And I found the biggest thing was the choice of microphone. Not solely, but in combination with the other things, the choice of microphone was a big deal. So in this instance, I have the condenser quite loud and it is giving a lot of the top and bottom. And then I have the 57 coming in, giving the mid. So let me just show you, right? So if I mute the condenser first of all, and then I turn it back on, that's because I have that one up quite loud. So if I mute the 57, it's nice, but it needs 57 for the bit of mid. And I'm quite happy with those. Okay, so I'm going to jump back to the camera now. So as you can see, I'm keeping the setup here with the Opus as a standalone unit as simple as humanly possible, right? So the other thing I'm going to do is just show you the other two sounds. So when I jump to the second preset, which is my dirty preset, it's nice. What that is the Albion preamp with the Pete Torn 212 cab, a hall reverb, and a 421 and condenser 47, so two condenser mics this time. So what I would say about this is, in a live situation, I would not do this. I would have one amp and I would use pedals to get the different sounds. And the reason for that is they're too different from each other. Back to the clean. And the dirty. When you start employing different cabinet simulations, different preamps, it becomes very, very difficult to make switching from one to the other viable, in my opinion, in a gigging situation. It's far better to
use this as a direct box to get your 1 amp sound and go direct to the PA with that. But I wanted to show the scope. So the first one's like a Fender. This is kind of a Marshall Plexi kind of thing. And just to show the pedal with that. So it takes pedals quite well too. And then the last sound I have is the heavy sound. This is the Eldorado preamp, so a Soldano style preamp with the EL34 power amp. I normally would choose 6L6 with it, I think, but I like the EL34. I'm not really mad on 6L6 power amps. They're too scooped. I like the mid that EL34s bring. Then I have the contour in depth and everything on the power amp straight up. And then I'm using a 57 and a ribbon on this, and they're at equal volume. And this will be for like... So as you can see, you can get various different amp tones, and that's only 3 of I think 7 different preamps that are available, and endless cabinet. The most important thing about this for me at this instance is this sound, the clean sound. Because I would use this direct at a gig and I would use pedals in front of it to get the various different tones. I may make a different demo about that. So that is the Opus by itself. What I'm going to do now is jump into showing you how the Opus can act as a cab sim with the Revolt. So I'm going to have to set up slightly differently, so give me a sec to do that. Okay, so what I'm doing now is you can see the inset picture has changed. This is the Revolt here. It's their all tube 100% analog preamp, and then I have the Opus here. And what's happening is my guitar is plugged into the Diva drive, going into the input of the Revolt, and it's coming out of the Revolt into the Opus. So the preamp is coming from the preamp sounds are coming from the Revolt, and the power amp sounds are coming from, or the power amp and speaker sounds are coming from the Opus. There's no preamp on in the Opus here. And I'm going to do just slightly lower that. Okay, now the other thing is I am currently recording both the analog speaker out, you can see that XLR there, the analog speaker out on the back of the Revolt, and I'm recording the digital, effectively cabinet sim and power amp sim and all the stuff that the Opus brings to the party on the out of the Opus. So I've got 2 outputs going because I wanted to compare the 2 sounds, right? So in order to do that, I'm going to need the controls for my interface. Okay. Okay, so that is the Fender Bassman style preamp from the Revolt, okay? And what's happening there is you can see I have the bass significantly backed off, the treble slightly pushed, the gain almost up full, and the volume straight up. Now, I want to talk about this for a second. I like this setup because these controls are here at my fingertips to be able to control, do whatever I want with them whenever I want with them, and that's what I like about this setup. I don't have to dive into any menus or use any apps or anything like that. It's all just controls at my fingertips. Then, to show you, right, so first of all, that's the clean. It's a less hi-fi sound than with the Opus by itself. I actually think it kind of sounds more analog. Middle pick, neck pickup. Okay, so what I'm going to do is play something through the cabinet with the Opus, and then something through the analog, the same thing through the analog cab out. So here is just like some strum chord. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, I'm recording both, but for my own ears, I'm going to mute the Opus and turn on the cab sim. Here is the cab sim from the Revolt. To be fair, the Opus sounds significantly better. Now the one thing is there is reverb on the Opus sound and there's not, because there's no reverb on the Revolt. It's coming from the Opus. It sounds significantly better. So again, here is the same thing played with the Opus. Okay, so I think I'm going to do the same with the next two sounds. Really quickly, going to jump over to the interface and show you what I've got going on in terms of speakers, power amps and stuff like that. Okay, so on this first sound, it's called Clean Spring 112. I have the, as you can see, no gate, no preamp. The power amp 6L6, same as it was before. And it's on pentode and the volume is at 3/4. I'm using the spring reverb. I'm using the same cab, the Nashville 112. I've got the EQ and enhancer off the reverb, and this time I'm using a condenser. It's actually the exact same. The condenser and the dynamic 57, and that's what I have going on. Now, that's the first sound. I'm going to jump back to the camera for a sec. Okay. The cool thing about this is I have the two speaking to each other in a MIDI. So if I switch over to my Marshall sound on the Revolt, it updates you'll see, right, number 1, and also if I hit the boost, it changes to number 2, and I go to number 2, I go to preset 2, and it changes to number 3 because that's the MIDI message that's going out. So now I have a 212 dirty cab, and so this is the Marshall sound, and it sounds like this. Pretty nice, you know. It's going to turn down my guitar in the room. That's a pretty great combination, okay? So same thing then, switch over to the Soldano channel and I get like the heavy sound. Now it's interesting to talk about this for a second. That's the one I'm least happy with because I'm struggling to find the right combination of power amp and cab to work well between the Marshall channel, this one, which I really like, and the Soldano one. It's a bit MIDI forward, you know, I need to play around with the cabs and stuff more, but just to show you what I'm doing with those quickly on the app, right? So, I'm just gonna go back to the dirty one. On the dirty one, again, the gate's on this time, the preamp's off, the power amp is EL34, you can see the volume, contour and depth. I'm using a 421 and a 57, pretty classic combination, but interestingly, the 57 is down a bit. There's no EQ, no enhancer. I'm using the Pete Thorne Signature 212, and I have the output and the preset level basically as they come out of the box. Okay, then if I switch to the Soldano, it's very similar. Again, the contour is backed off a bit, and I have the condenser pulled down slightly here and the 57 boosted, and I have the EQ on here, although I don't think it's really doing anything. It's adding a little bit of definition, and then I have the reverb, and again I think I'm going to have to play with the EQ here to make this work. So that's how I have it set up. You'll notice between the two dirty and heavy I'm using the same cab, and that's very much on purpose. So I'm going to jump back over to the camera now for the kind of conclusion of this section. So the main reason I'm making this video is I think for me this is a better solution in a live situation if I wanted to use different channels than using the Opus by itself, and it's because all of the preamp sounds are coming from the Revolt and the knobs are there at the floor for me to tweak with my fingers. But the Opus output, so the power amp and cab simulation, sounds vastly superior to the onboard simple analog cab simulation from the Revolt, and being able to switch them from sound to sound does help. So, in my opinion, the Opus works great in this situation by itself, but I think the optimal outcome here is to have both units use this as your preamp to get the tube sound, and also to have the knobs there on stage in front of you, and use this for your cabinet and power amp. Now, the other thing is, I could set up a preset where this is bypassed and there's an AC30 style sound on this, and I could have the best of all worlds. But I think I would go with this setup. I think this setup is the optimal outcome.
However, the Opus is pretty impressive by itself. So, there you go. I guess, who is this for? And I think this is for absolutely anyone who either wants to record a direct sound from their amplifier, and a really, really good and very, very controllable direct sound. So I think for a live sound, you can use this in isolation by itself, or you can use this with your amplifier. But I think keeping the tweakability to a minimum. I want to stress actually that I got this unit and I've had it for like 10 days. I don't like excessive tweakability. And the reason is, for that 10 days that I was using this device and kept coming back to it, right? Every time I came back to it, I'd tweak something else, literally because of the way I was hearing it that day. Sometimes things can be too tweakable, and I ended up really having to stop myself from tweaking any further and going, these sounds are good enough for me to be able to deliver the dramatic impact I'm trying to get live. So that's why I don't use the enhancer. I rarely use the EQ. I try to keep the controls to an absolute minimum so I can stay with the fundamental core of the sound I'm trying to get. What's good about this is you can do that if you want, but you can also, I should turn it around. You can do that if you want, but you can also tweak your brains out if you want to. Like, it's very, very, very capable. So fair play to Two Notes for creating, I think, probably the most comprehensive amp, cabinet, microphone, EQ, IR loading, if you want to, single device I've ever come across. It's kind of very similar to the IR 200 by Boss, but in truth, I think it's significantly better than that. It sounds better. It's easier to use with the app. The app is actually just nicer looking to use, and it's lighter and it's slightly smaller. It's very impressive. So fair play Two Notes. This is a serious piece of kit. So there you go. The Opus from Two Notes. Any questions, throw them in the comment section down below. Apologies for the dodgy focusing of my camera. It seems to be really struggling to focus on me today. Throw them in the comment section down below and I'll answer them if I can. And if you've watched the video this far, I say thank you, and I'll ask you to please like and subscribe and hit the notifications bell, because you'll get notified every time I put out a new video. And yeah, the Opus. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in another video again soon. Take it easy. Bye bye.